Hi, I'm Liz. This is Marc and Kerry, and we are the judges for the picture book category. Dear Broccoli is by Joe Dabrowski with pictures by Cate James. This funny, sweet and fresh epistolary is reminiscent of the day the crayons quit, but on the battleground of the dinner table. Frank does not like broccoli, but unfortunately the feeling is not mutual. In their letters, Broccoli manages to sneak in a lot of information about nutrition, and Frank slowly begins to appreciate that broccoli is perhaps more friend than foe. Kids and me will appreciate that his tastes don't radically change at the end of this book, which makes the narrative feel a lot more authentic. Both child and adult perspectives on vegetables are respected in this book, with a special mention for Grandpa, who only eats brown things. The illustrations throughout this book are excellent, even with the necessary inclusion of a letter on each page. It's extremely fresh, much like the broccoli. This is a great read aloud for story time, but it's also a terrific resource for conversations about healthy eating. Tiwi in Paris is written and illustrated by Glen farmer Illortaminni. What happens when an artist from the remote Tiwi Islands gets lost in Paris? Glen farmer Illortaminni travels to Paris with his uncle, artist Timothy Cook, but on the first night he goes for a walk and can't find his way back to the hotel. Over the next few days, Glen is completely lost and alone in one of the most famous cities in the world. The gorgeous illustrations in this book mix traditional Tiwi styles and colours with line drawings of famous Parisian landmarks. Glen meets a few kind people along the way, but ultimately has to draw on the strength of his ancestors and his connection to country to find his way back. The relief when he finds the Australian Embassy is a moment I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. This is a book full of humour and heart. It is a longer picture book, but the pace is excellent so it doesn't get boring, and it's a wonderful example of a picture book that would suit younger and older readers.
So this is Dawn, written and illustrated by Marc. This story invites you to take a journey around a lake at dawn and watch the world as it slowly awakens. Follow the creatures who rise with the early morning and who depend on our sun for its warmth and light. The single words beneath each of the images gives the reader time to dive into these breathtaking illustrations. There's clever use of alliteration and rhyme that enriches the read-aloud quality of this text. The illustrative perspective is masterfully executed, compelling readers to look at the world from different viewpoints on each of the pages. The colour palette is soft, bold and rich, with the blurred background prompting focus on the central element in each of the illustrations. The embossed title and the dragonfly and the stunning cover are an ingenious addition to entice the reader. This is a simple, quiet story, demonstrates the interconnectedness of life in this beautifully illustrated microcosm. Although the text indicates a younger audience, there is so much more here. Once I Was a Giant, written and illustrated by Zeno. This is a visually breathtaking, thought-provoking story that sparks the imagination while remaining rooted in the essential truth of how vital trees are to our survival. It begins with a writer struggling for inspiration, who is then stunned when his pencil all of a sudden says, "Hello." The story, though, actually begins with the opening end papers, depicting the writer in an apartment building in a city and ending with the tree as a giant once again, reinforcing the optimism and caring that is at the heart of this story. This story within a story chronicles the tree's journey from seedling to giant, sapling to guardian, and living to felled, ultimately becoming an unassuming pencil. The grief that the small wanderer feels as it looks on as machines destroy the tree is palpable. The textured cover and the embossed title are a clever touch, creating an immediate tactile connection between the book and the reader, much like the bond between the wanderer and the tree. Clever design of the cover to look both taller and narrower, like the tree on the cover, is another ingenious take. The colour palette is strong but subtle. The tones used for the wanderer add to the whimsy and magic of this tiny creature, and the colouring, depiction and perspective of the tree is truly beautiful. There are so many layers in this masterfully created tale that celebrates hope and renewal and prompts us to reflect on our connection to the world around us, especially trees.
This is The Frog's First Song, written by Jazz Money and illustrated by Jason Friddle, and I really want you to read this book. If you think you know what an Australian First Nations picture book looks like, think again, because this is different from every other book you've looked at. It starts off with a black double page and there's a frog down a well. The frog, you can hardly see the frog, it's just scratched in white out of that black. And the frog feels lonely, feels isolated and depressed, and water starts dripping out of the well. And as the water drips, the frog hears a rhythm, and the rhythm gathers, and it becomes melody. And as the melody grows, the frog looks around and sees that he's not alone. There are other frogs present. And those frogs start to introduce colour into the illustrations. They're green, they have pink or lilac noses. And as they grow together, the melody swells and we come up out of the well, up towards the light, and there's a moon shining down, this golden light. And there's an intensely blue sky. And we see water lilies. And what happens is that this celebration of music turns into a chorus, a perfect setting for this. This is a wonderful book for addressing the emotional dysregulation that people see in young readers today. It moves from gloom to optimism. It's a wonderful celebration of country, of community, and of a future. This is Bob and Dob by Sean E. Avery. What a book. Every young reader is going to love this. They're going to laugh. They're going to dress up. It's a fun book. You don't need the glossary on the back, which tells you all sorts of synonyms for dobber: blabbermouth, big mouth, grass, informer, narc, rumour monger, and so on. Every Australian kid knows what a dobber is. It's the worst thing you could... Well, actually, since post-invasion Australia, for 200 years, the worst thing you could be in Australia is a dobber. Here are two brothers. They're little birds. One is Bob, and he's got a brother who called Dob, who would really like to be as important as Bob is. And so he keeps dobbing him in. He keeps telling stories about him. And Bob keeps getting into trouble. The other great character in this is their mum. She's a huge figure. She dominates the page. She is eventually sick and tired of this dobbing. And she says, right, no more dobbing. Then one day, Bob almost gets eaten by a crocodile. And it's Dob who tells a story that lures the crocodile away from what he thinks is a great breakfast, and he saves Bob's life. At the end, Dob becomes a celebrated entertainer who has a theatre and entertains people with these stories. Now, this is a story for a society that no longer seems to know what's the difference between truth and lies. Just exactly what the inference is at the end, where you can tell a lie as long as it's for good purposes, will encourage lots of kids and their teachers and parents to have a discussion about the difference between telling the truth and telling a lie. I actually love Dob, and I guess that's the end of the book for me. Fantastic, read it.